Understood.
Recently, I've been streaming the Final Fantasy VII Remake over on Twitch. It's a game I've enjoyed a great deal, actually, already having spent over 100 hours on the Steam version, finishing it all the way through twice, including the New Game Plus hard mode. And can I just say, a Final Fantasy game with a New Game Plus is quite a bizarre experience, not something I'm used to. But it is a very welcome addition that I hope continues to be a core part of the experience going forward. It's not really a subject I'll be diving into, it merely shifted my focus, once again, away from the Final Fantasy VIII video that will, definitely, be coming next. Because there are a few things that have been really standing out to me, more than ever. It's also weirdly topical right now, because of that big kerfuffle about the yellow boxes in the recently released Resident Evil 4 remake. Something I haven't been playing recently and I'm honestly highly unlikely to get around to anytime soon, if at all. It simply struck me as something apt to make mention of. Because I'm not usually the type to jump on a current trending bandwagon. I have neither the time, patience, nor inclination to go out of my way to keep up with the rest of the gaming world in such a way. It just so happened to be something that had been zipping around in my rumbly wee noggin already. That being, as the title should have given away, Diegesis and Immersion. For those unfamiliar with the term, diegesis, or diegetic storytelling, is the style of demonstrating a work's themes through the presentation itself. The easiest example would be the way some games use music to underscore the dynamic nature of gameplay, such as increasing the volume and intensity of the battle music in Devil May Cry 5, or the way Sons of the Patriots... Was it Sons of the Patriots? Metal Gear Solid 2. The way it had an ambient score that would shift almost seamlessly between stealth and action sequences. Not just one track being faded out in favour of another or suddenly cutting, but layering over the top. So it has a more natural flow that helps prevent breaking the immersion. Because that's more what I really want to focus on here, this idea of immersion. It's a word that is thrown around a lot. A hell of a lot in the video game world. And it's one that I think a lot of people don't really understand, or more accurately at least, can't really agree on the specific definition of it. One of those you know it when you see it kind of things. But really, even then, a lot of people don't, or again, much more accurately, we just don't agree on what immersion really is, what it means in the sense of video games. Each of us focusing on different aspects that have greater or lesser importance based on personal experience, personal preference. So, allow me to show you something that I've always found cynically, frankly, hilarious. Okay, look, I swear, this wasn't deliberate. I'm not trying to suggest anything by talking about 3 games that have had remakes. It's a subject I do intend to come back to, but it really is nothing more than a curious coincidence right now. But Dead Space is being lauded and applauded for its approach to communicating information to the player, and rightly so. Everything from your remaining ammo to Isaac's general health is tied directly into the way the world looks, even the on-screen compass, so to speak. Absolutely everything about the game's presentation is built specifically with the intent to minimize the disconnect between the player and the game as much as humanly possible. It really cannot be understated just how cohesive this idea is throughout the entire experience, and it is absolutely glorious. It has most certainly earned its place as the poster child for ludonarrative cohesion. Another word I need to explain. Whatever. Look up Ludology for yourself if you don't get it. The point is, it doesn't fall into pretty much any of the typical conceits one would expect from experiencing a piece of digital entertainment. There is almost nothing about its visual style that will do anything to take you out of the moment. Because, it seems, we all agree that immersion is nigh essential to fully losing oneself in the universe a dev has spent so much time crafting for us. Sir Mix-a-Lot. It's fucking third person. Seriously. If you're so thoroughly incapable of letting yourself sink in and feel like you, not the character, you are literally present in the game, then surely it would be a huge undertaking to look past the fact that you're hovering a few feet behind someone's shoulder. And if you can look past that, why does it matter if we have a bunch of random text and stuff on the screen as well? Especially since there are such a huge number of people out there who also play a game when it looks like this.
Isaac, be careful. Shooting them in the body didn't seem to work.
All this happy horse shit.
Now, to clarify, I'm talking about the subtitles. And further, I'm not in any way intending to denigrate their inclusion. I've already made an entire video about accessibility and how much I appreciate the increasing trend of doing everything we can to make games as approachable to as wide an audience as we possibly can. If you can't hear what's being said, then sure, subtitles are a great solution. A conceit we simply accept as a necessity for maximizing one's ability to engage with not only the world, but also the narrative. Also useful for learning another language. You hear what they say in that language, then you read it in your language, so to speak. It's hard to enjoy a game story if, you don't even know what it is. But that is not the same as choosing to have them switched on because you simply prefer it. And hey, I'm a subs better than dub kind of guy, so I have no issue with it. We also typically have subtitles turned on by default whenever we watch anything streaming or what have you, at home. It doesn't bother me either way. You do you. I just find it honestly baffling that people will talk so much about things that break immersion while simulating having floating text pinned to your eyeballs. And this is without even needing to mention the fact that we use a controller and other peripheral equipment in the first place, keyboard and mouse in my case. You see what I mean? It's weird to me that people can so easily look past one thing, then pick another arbitrary hill to die on. I don't get it. But hey, like I'm always saying, you do you. I'm not here to judge. I can find something baffling without having to make it personal. If, for whatever reason, you do feel like this is some kind of slight, well, you do you, pork on. As alluded to above, I merely place my value in a different direction. Immersion to me is, well, precisely that. Either I'm immersed, or I'm not. Perhaps it's because I think in words. I live and breathe words. I'm a writer, you might have noticed. So, the earliest things I can remember truly losing myself in, those were books. Black words on an off-white piece of paper. The images, the entire world conjured up solely within the confines of my own mind. Cast on the back of my eyelids. Perhaps that's one of the key factors. I don't know. Could be my age too. When I were a lad, games didn't even have polygons. Yeah, I know. Old lady meme. But it's true. For the most part, at least. There's a big, huge kerfuffle about polygons being used when the PlayStation launched. As in, the PlayStation, the PSX, the PS1, as people insist on calling it now. Something which I actually didn't have the opportunity to play around with until I was 16 years old. And not because I was super late to the party, which is another subject I'm sure I'll come back to later, related to all the remakes. The glut of lo-fi 16/32-bit nostalgia games. You merely adopted the pixel and all that. Anywho...
I don't know.
Let's look at this more clinically, or academically would be the better word. What actually is immersion? Like, definitionally, what does it mean? Because like a lot of words we, apparently, so witty, all know what it means in a practical sense, if not something we can clearly define. But that, dear viewer, is precisely what I intend to do. Well, there are two primary dictionary definitions. The first about being plonked in a liquid until it goes all Sum 41 on your ass, and not much use to us here, that one. No, it's far more apt than you may realise. The second, however, is what we generally are getting at, to be deeply, mentally, or intellectually invested in something. Which sounds pretty darn close to what I was saying about reading, eh? Go look up the exact definitions, I can't be asked about it. I'm not going to go into the whole dictionary doesn't inform shit. And it is shit. So, sure, I'll grant you, the way we use words does not always, apparently, lol, reflect what a word has been academically defined to mean. Though, often pretty close. There is absolutely a degree of drift, which is not something that I am at all opposed to. I, like many a young middle-aged man, will happily talk about how bad something is. Like badass. You know, that's really bad. Like Michael Jackson sense. Maybe not the Michael Jackson sense. You know what I mean? It's bad, but it's good. In a good way. It's so bad, man. I love the Power Glove. The only thing I ask is that we can reach a consensus on where we stand. And not even to the extent that we have to agree on the exact definitions. Semantics is a subject I am deeply invested in. Immersed, even, one could say, on an academic level. Is it obvious that I devote a significant percentage of my executive reasoning resources to contemplating? Like, just contemplating, not anything specific. I think it is. So, if you do so desire to have a discussion on semantics, that is right up my street. However, I do stress the word discussion, another definition, because this little aside actually has a point. Because I want to reinforce that when I say we should agree on definition, I mean only that all parties accept each other's position. Intellectual integrity demands that we argue in good faith and with allowance for dissenting opinion. Or, put simply, even if we disagree on what we mean, when we use a specific word, we accept that the other may be professing from an alternate understanding. If you say ironic means something that is a contradiction, and I say it is, like the dictionary, merely something unexpected, we don't have to agree on one definition, merely remember that the other does. So when I say ironic, I mean unexpected, and you will understand that when I say that, I mean unexpected. Even if you are using it simply to mean a contradiction. Do you understand? Oh, whilst we're on the subject, by the way, I'm inclined to believe that Alanis Morissette knew that dictionarily, is that a word? It is now. She was incorrectly using the word ironic, something like 57 times in her song. I think it was 57. I'm not sure on the specific number. And I think that was the real point of it all, the song. The ironic use of ironic was the irony she was really singing about. Maybe I'm overthinking it, looking into it a bit too deeply, but would I?
Moving on.
Speaking of words, I'd like to take a moment to more clearly define subjective and objective. Again, definitions, because we hear the latter thrown around a lot, as though it makes an assertion more impactful in some way. A great example being how The Last Jedi is objectively a bad film, which, no, it really isn't. Art never is. Except it actually is, because contrary to the vernacular understanding, when something is objective, that doesn't make it irrefutably true, 100% accurate. if such a thing can even exist to begin with, it is actually a statement that something can be supported by evidence. Without even the proviso that the evidence itself is provably correct either, it's a lot more, well, funnily enough, subjective than that. So, yeah, if you think The Last Jedi is a terrible thing and you have supporting evidence to bolster that assertion, even if it is entirely personal opinion, then to you, it is objectively bad. As in, you have taken all of the information at your disposal, assessed the film's quality, formed a conclusion, and are now stating that position as factual. And for you, and for many other people, clearly, it objectively is a terrible film. Meanwhile, ever the contrarian, apparently, it's my favourite of the Star Wars franchise. Not the best. I'd probably offer that title to Empire, but still. That doesn't mean either of us is right or wrong, merely that we have differing values for what we do or do not consider a mark of quality. So what makes a game immersive to you simply differs from myself, probably. Or maybe it doesn't, I don't know. Hypothetically speaking. I don't care overly much about the visual presentation of a video game, not as a primary deciding factor. I certainly prefer art design done in the style of Dead Space, or world design, or diegetic design if you prefer. But that's all it is. A preference. It's another layer of the much fabled immersion that I greatly appreciate. Just not one that I can truly say I miss when the design may take a different path. I guess I stand in a position where I put the onus more on myself to make the effort to engage with something, and the primary deciding factor of whether I ultimately get into something is, well, do I like it? Did I get into it? That's it. But what, you should be wondering, in the ever-loving divine flump, does any of this have to do with the Final Fantasy VII Remake? And that is a very good question, dear viewer, because you see, multiple times throughout the game, it fucking goes ahead and does this shit, and it drives me up the bleeding wall. It is one of those things that actually does go a long way toward breaking my sense of immersion. It takes me out of the moment and overrules any sense of engagement I may have built up for a scant few seconds, and replaces it with a deep frustration. Because if I want to be an utter dipshit, not pay any attention, and leave myself completely lost on what I'm supposed to do, see, or remember, that is entirely my own fault, and that is actually something else that Dead Space does let you do. You can just look wherever you want. It doesn't matter what's going on behind you if you don't want to look at it. However, my wife works in research. Not video games, but a related field. A tech field. Which means, clearly, I know everything about it. I was here first. After all, my father was a solicitor, housing law. So I can easily represent you in court, because that's exactly how that works. I mean, my grandfather was Special Forces, so I must be one of the most skilled military personnel you're ever going to meet. Lol. No, of course not. What it does mean is that I've been used as a sounding board for some of the research she's done, and have, albeit in a very hands-off sense, assisted her in passing data from time to time. So take that all under advisement, because I do have some experience. Some. And I can tell you with a great deal of certainty that the end user is a great big stupid head. Just look at Sekiro, probably won't put footage. It received some flack for not being a Souls-like, despite, not being a Souls-like, or maybe because of it. It never claimed to be a Souls-like, and in fact made it quite clear that it was never intended to be. It bore some similarities to the style, yes, but it was very much its own thing. Yet people are still spitting mad that Sekiro is what it is, rather than what some players expected it to be. And still do. Let's be honest. There are people still annoyed at having to play the game the way it's made, rather than the way they want it to be. What they want it to act like, how they wanted it to be made. To put that into the current context, the end user, players, don't always do what you expect them to. Will often even do something completely different, and will then compound that problem by being annoyed that what they wanted to do is not what they were supposed to do. So when it comes to guiding someone in the correct direction, developers do have to put some lateral thinking into how they're going to do it. Some things work better than others, and some things really stand out. The prevalence of white paint on ledges and walls that you can climb up has been raised more than once. It does stand out as being more than a little weird in pretty much every instance, not just ancient tombs and lost civilizations. But at the same time, it's unobtrusive enough that mostly we just accept it as a necessary evil of communicating a game's mechanics and interactions to us. Like how we all understand that red, sometimes yellow, barrels will explode and do damage to anything nearby. Green ones will probably leave a cloud. Purple ones are sometimes used as a special magical one. You get my point? It's a persistent, standardized factor of the design language of video games.
I understood that reference.
Other points of interest are more difficult to consistently convey. We may accept white paint and red barrels, but you can't just smear liquid vinyl all over everything. So how do you make sure your audience knows when something is supposed to stand out? Where does immersion end and direction begin? There are several solutions I've seen over the years, each with their merits and flaws, and each with its proponents and detractors. Personally, I'm more than happy for it all to just go away completely and leave me to figure it out entirely on my own. Like, no HUD, no prompts, no guiding lights, just build it, let me have fun in it. But methods such as having a button with a visual or audio prompt to press it when there's a point of interest is a happy medium. You know, you press down to look at what you're supposed to see, but you control when you do it. It's there if I need it, I can control when I use it, and I can just ignore it if I prefer. But this is where the real minutiae of the discussion starts to really make itself known. I don't have exact numbers, nor do I care to look deeply enough to get some, which is wrong because I did actually run a small poll on Twitter. My reach is quite small, and the results were surprising. All I can tell you is that some people despise this even more than the game wrestling control away from you. At least with the latter approach, it's usually accompanied by a character saying, "Hey, look over there," and pointing, which I also quite like on paper. It's just the aspect of the game taking away control. I'm firmly of the opinion that a game should only take direct control during a scripted cinematic moment. Cutscenes are fine. The bits we clearly know we are supposed to just sit and watch. But then we have games where you have a lengthy cutscene, walk a few steps, then have another one. That gets right up my nose too. Just make the cinematic a minute longer and have it all be one thing. But what do you do when there's a longer gap between those moments, and the little bit that needs your attention only lasts a few seconds? Do we really need a 6-second cutscene just to say, "Huh, what was that noise?" That would crawl right up my arse as well, as I'm sure it would many other people. So do you see what I'm getting at? There's a lot, a hell of a lot, that goes into game development. Above and beyond the simply coding and art design aspect of what a game looks and plays like, what precisely do you do to ensure everything is communicated to us, the players? That can vary heavily from one person to the next. How they think it should be best done, how they want it to be done, how they feel like when they're experiencing things, how they feel when they experience these things. And that's the real issue people are trying to get to when they start talking about immersion, I think. What works for one person, the design decisions that allow one person to truly lose themselves in a digital world, can be the very thing that drags someone else out of it. It really does come down to what you, as an individual, value most about your entertainment. On-screen prompts are bugger all in my mind. I don't care. It in no way devalues my sense of connection or disconnect. I already know at all times that I'm playing a video game. I'm using a TV and have a lump of plastic in my hands, a few icons floating in front of my face, neither adds nor detracts from that. But I'm just one person who is quite well known for being a little esoteric in my opinions, a full-blown contrarian even. But here's a suggestion. This is what I, in my not-so-humble opinion, would view as the best all-around solution. I want to harken back to a previous video for a moment, maybe even do a little self-promotion whilst I'm at it. I've already talked about accessibility at length, as mentioned above. I would say link in the description, but I'll probably forget. Point is, I made a video about it, like colorblind modes and that kind of thing. My ultimate takeaway from that is that it's all good, bro. More options is good, with a stress on the second word. I'm of the opinion that the best solution would be to make a lot of these things optional. Have them active by default, like games always seem to do with subtitles, and bury them several layers down in the options to turn off, but have them on by default. People like myself, who don't want to use Lara's instincts, or whatever it was called, will find the option to turn them off if there is one. I do specifically go looking for it. Meanwhile, the people who want these things, or don't care either way, they're not likely to ever even, well, care. And yeah, sure, have it be one of those huge pop-up things that asks if you are really super serial for certain sure that you're certain you definitely do for sure want it to be off. It's a bit of a personal bugbear when games do that kind of thing, but I'd much prefer that over a lot of the stuff that is currently done. And then, if it affects the game negatively during my playthrough, well, that's on me. I already ruin a lot of my gaming time by popping games on hard, and whilst I will make my opinions clear when it has been balanced poorly, I still hold that it is, absolutely, my own fault. And hey, there's a huge difference between a game being cheap bullshit one-hit kills and a relatively minor option to make white paint and yellow tape go away. The primary aspects that affect my ability to invest or immerse myself in a game don't extend to a lot of visual elements, as mentioned above. But if the option to turn them off is there, I'm going to take it. Especially if it does away with those fucking pop-up tutorial prompts. I loathe that shit. Not because of immersion though, it just breaks the flow and gets in my way. I just do not like them. I know how to play the fucking game. The key here, really, is to make everything fit in with everything else. One of the best experiences I've ever had with a video game was playing The Division with a friend. We were on our way to do a mission, pretty much all of which I've completely forgotten. All the missions, I barely remember any of them. I remember there was a helicopter in one of them. But we came across a rooftop garden, and we just stopped and spent several minutes there looking at everything. The way some chairs had been knocked over, the pieces of food detritus scattered on the tables and floor. It was fascinating to just think about how all of this went down. What it said about what these fictional people had been doing when everything kicked off. Even so far as to be able to work out roughly how many were eating and which way they left. That's what I think of when I think immersion. That level of attention to detail to such a minor thing that most people will never see, even if they run right past it. It was a great little piece of environmental, or rather, diegetic storytelling. And everything about it fit with the themes and narrative of the game. I mean, you can't really expect that level of consideration to go into the entire thing, sure, not with a game that size anyway. But even just a still occurrence like that is enough to draw someone in, someone like me anyway, if they take the time to engage with it. In that moment, as well as others, I didn't care about the game's UI, or the HUD clutter, or the bullet sponge enemies. I was completely on board. And I'd assert that anyone else could be if they're merely willing to reconsider what immersion really means, what it can mean. Video games already request a lot of engagement. They are already built entirely around the concept of us, the players, doing the lion's share of the work. So is it really so hard for us to take that one level deeper? I don't think so. But as always, if you don't want to, if you're not willing, then, well, that's your prerogative. I would simply wish to end by reiterating that let's not be dicks about it. State your position and your desires in a polite, respectful way. Or scream and rail. Just do you. The former is generally more effective though, so perhaps bear that in mind. Coming up next, finally, will be my Final Fantasy VIII video. But until then, you can come find me on Twitch, where I'm currently streaming Primal, an old PlayStation 2 title, which I recently learned is available digitally on the PlayStation 4, between approximately 0900 and 1200 GMT every Monday, Wednesday and Friday. Our channel is Bunny and the Senpai, all one word, and if you're quick, you'll also see some bonus Bebe joining me for the streams. I also have a Patreon, if you feel so inclined, and of course, previous videos, so until next time, thank you for watching.
It's on you.
Hang back. Don't overdo it.
Guess it's my turn.